What is this obsession with documentaries being 6 episodes long when there is not 6 episodes worth of content?
I bring the pain like
Hey guys, dearyoongi here, and welcome back to my channel. On the 30th of August, Apple TV premiered its documentary titled K-pop Idols, which was labelled as an unprecedented backstage pass to the world's biggest musical phenomenon, and promised us an intense look at the reality of K-pop stardom as it followed artists Jessi, Cravity, and Blackswan. I watched this documentary in its entirety, so you don't have to, but thought it would be interesting for us to look at my findings together. So in today's video, I'll be giving you as much of a run through of each episode, there were 6 of them in total, as I can without Apple TV fighting me, before I give you guys my review on this documentary and also what it told us about each of these artists and maybe even K-pop as a whole, hopefully. Okay, let's jump into it because I think this is going to be a long video. I took notes of everything that was happening while watching this thing so I could be as thorough as possible for you guys, but my notes are literally 29 pages long, so let's try to compress this thing. The first episode was titled Different Type of Beast, which is the opening line to Jessi's song What Type of X, which is also the theme song used throughout the documentary. But of course, calling the first episode Different Type of Beast is a clever play on words, because as many of us know, the K-pop industry is a very different type of beast compared to anything we've known before. The first episode's synopsis tells us that we'll be looking at Jessi embarking on her first solo tour. The wording isn't the best here. She has of course toured solo before, but this means it's the first time she's touring solo without a company and having to organise a lot of things herself. And we'll also be witnessing Cravity and Blackswan prepare for their debuts, whilst tensions arise within one group. I'm sure anybody familiar with the story of these groups can guess which one they're referring to with that comment. So this episode opens with fans talking about how much they love K-pop and why, K-pop's popularity, but then very quickly it swerves into talking about the extreme high standards K-pop idols are held to. We're briefly shown little teasers of what's to come throughout the show, such as Jessi saying fans don't know what she has to go through to be the performer they see, and that everything you do is a competition. We see the Cravity members crying and clearly struggling in the practice room, and Black Swan's Fatu explains difficulties of being the first African K-pop idol. After the opening credits roll, the first artist to introduce herself properly to us is Jessi, while we hear clips of fans talking about how much they love her, and her friend and producer Koala discusses how Jessi helped pave the way for Korean Americans to have a place within the K-pop industry. Jessi explains how it took her 18 years to reach this stage in her career, and the fact that, quote, once you get older, nobody wants you anymore, which as many of us know is true from the level of ageism we see within the K-pop industry. Jessi then goes on to speak about the number of times she gave up on her career as a K-pop artist, even going back to America before she got the call to come back to Korea to complete on the TV show Unpretty Rap Star, which helped skyrocketing her into the limelight due to the success of the show in Korea. Interestingly, Jessi then speaks about meeting Psy and how he brainwashed her words, into being the first artist to join his label because she had the potential to be huge with his help. This led to the release of what is her probably most successful song to date, Nunu Nana. Jessi then mentions how at the time she felt like this was everything she ever dreamt of, but then got too sucked into making hit songs and then started getting really sad. She wanted to start making music to show her fans that a boss woman like her can feel vulnerable too, but Psy wanted her to keep making music that would chart well because that's how they make the most money. Jessi says that she kept trying to please everybody and that's when she kind of lost it. She left that label after 3 years, knowing it was the biggest risk of her life, but she needed a new challenge. Following this decision, Jessi says it's the hardest point in her life right now because being without a label is both difficult and lonely. Next up, we meet the founder and CEO of DR Music, Mr. Yoon, and his son Philip. They explain how they were the first K-pop label to have a K-pop group with a female rapper with baby vox. Please don't fact check dearyoongi on this, by the way. I don't know if that's actually true, it's just what he said. They also explain how they were the first label to hit the global market with baby vox, laying the foundations for K-pop to go international. Controversial comment, I thought, as soon as he said it, but again, his words, not mine. line. The pair explain how they have failed to create a group with the same impact Baby Vox had, so they decided they need to create a group who are able to make a global impact. Thus, Blackswan was born, bringing members from all over the world together so they could penetrate different markets. Mr. Yoon says, "If I have one dream or wish, it would be for Blackswan to hit #1 on the Billboard charts and be #1 in the world." We first meet the Blackswan girls 2 days before their first concert in Brussels, Belgium, where the group is quite popular because one of their members, Fatou, is from Belgium. In their interviews, we hear the members at the time sharing their thoughts on one another to help introduce us to each of them and their roles within the group. Member Judy speaks about how Leia lights up the group's mood because she is the maknae. Younghoon said Fatou is like the group's dad because she's the strongest, and they always feel confident whenever she's at the front on stage because she brings the charisma. Fatou talks about her upbringing in Senegal and Belgium, how there was always music in her life from a young age and it's a happy place for her. She was introduced to Shiny by a friend when she was 14 years old, and that's how she got into K-pop. She mentions how she first came to Korea when she was 23 and fell even more in love with the country. Fatou got in connection with a modeling company who signed her, and the CEO of the modeling agency just happened to know the CEO of DR Music, who asked her how she felt about becoming a K-pop idol. She says that she trained for 1 year before her debut, a time in which she became close with the members, especially Leia, because they're both far away from their families, with Leia being from Brazil. Fatou says the biggest sacrifice she made to become a K-pop idol was definitely her family, because she hasn't seen them in 2 years. Following on from Fatou's comment regarding their closeness, Philip, aka the CEO's son, says there are so many factors that determine how successful a group will be, one of these being their relationship, and luckily the Blackswan members get along really well. I'm sure without knowing the lineup of Blackswan's story, we can clearly tell from the fact this comment was included that this is going to have some sort of relevance later on in true documentary style. Next up, we meet MJ, the director of Starship Entertainment, who introduces the label's groups. Gravity's performance director, Siwon, explains how the label decided to debut a new boy group 5 years after Monster X's debut, thus now we have Cravity. We then meet Cravity member aaand, who introduces the group and their vibe. We meet another member, Taeyoung, who reveals he decided he wanted to become a K-pop idol after seeing Monster X. However, aaand explains that there is pressure following in Monster X's footsteps to be just as successful as they are, if not more, and he hopes that Cravity can achieve that someday. But unfortunately for Cravity, they debuted during the pandemic, so it was really difficult for them not being able to perform in front of an audience. We rejoin Blackswan 1 day before their concert at their fan meeting, where we see more of Leia for the first time in her interview. She says she first listened to K-pop during a difficult time in her life because it was while her parents were going through a divorce, and she actually discovered K-pop by accident but was hooked from there. Her friend told her DR Music was looking for Brazilian girls to become trainees because Brazil is one of the biggest markets for K-pop, so they were therefore looking to sign a Brazilian trainee for a global group. Philip saw Leia's audition tape and actually said in the documentary that her vocals and dancing skills were not good, but she spoke good Korean, and because she's mixed Brazilian and Japanese, they were also interested by her unique visuals, and therefore decided to invite her to Korea. Back with Jessi, we meet her friend Eddie, who explains how he joined Jessi on her Europe tour for photography purposes, and got a lot of footage of her during this time and all its difficulties. Jessi explains that this tour will be 5 cities around Europe within 2 weeks, and because this is her first time touring without being signed to a company, she has to do everything on her own to prepare. She said it's like being back to square one, just older. We meet Jessi's mum, who says Jessi told her at a young age she wanted to become a K-pop idol because she was so fascinated by K-pop, but she never thought Jessi would become a singer. Jessi speaks about her last release at Psy's label, P Nation, titled Zoom. Shortly after the release of this song, Psy released his collaboration with BTS's Suga, That. Jessi says this is when she and Psy had a little falling out because she was frustrated with him and felt he was more focused on being an idol than her career by dropping an album at the same time she did. He totally forgot about me and I was hurt by that, Jessi says. This was when she told him she wanted to leave the label because she was at an age where she wanted to start an impact, and he let her go. However, Jessi mentions how it's constantly draining now that she's doing it on her own because she has to think about contracts, etc., things she never even considered before. Whilst we hear Jessi speak of this in her interview, on the screen she's at the first stop of her Europe Europe show in Berlin. She's visibly upset and stressed because she's losing her voice before the show. We join Cravity in Seoul one day before their first ever concert in front of a live audience, a whole 2 years into their career. They're of course worried and concerned because this is the first time fans will get to see them as performers, and they know how important first impressions can be. We see them rehearsing over and over for hours until they're crashing out on the practice room floor. Taehyung says the biggest hope for his career is to become like BTS, and he says, "I hope we're not one of those groups who get forgotten." Next, it's the day of Blackswan's Brussels concert, and there's 15,000 people in attendance, which is more than they expected. But most importantly, Fatu's family are in the audience, and Fatu is very nervous because this is the first time they'll be seeing her perform as an idol. In her interview, and while we're watching Blackswan performing on stage and doing really well, Fatu says that she always worries about saying the wrong thing, in case people think that's the way that all the Blackswan members think. After the concert, the members meet Fatu's mum backstage, and everybody is emotional and crying as Fatu's mother explains how proud she is of not just Fatu, but all of them. In the background, we hear Fatu's mum explaining how it hits her that she's sharing her daughter with the world, and she's scared of losing her. Last part for this episode, I'm sorry, I know there's a lot of content in these earlier episodes, but trust me, spoiler alert, it'll speed up later. We're now back in Seoul, and it's 6 weeks after Blackswan's concert in Belgium, and this is when we find out there are issues within the group, particularly between Fatu and Leia. Philip explains to us how in Belgium after the concert, Fatu's mother invited the group to her house for dinner, and all of the managers left them to it so they could have some bonding time together. This is when the altercation occurred, where Fatu says Leia said some very disrespectful things to her family, and it showed her a side of her she didn't know she had. Leia says that Fatu also said some hurtful words to her too, and therefore she does not want to apologize. This cliffhanger is where the episode ends. This show loves doing that to get you hooked on the next episode. Time for episode 2, which is titled #Fighting. I'm not sure what the hashtag is all about, but of course this one had a double meaning like the first title. Fighting can be referring to the way idols or groups psych each other up by saying fighting as like a word of encouragement, or it could literally be referring to Fatu and Leia having issues. The synopsis of this episode explains how Jessi is blindsided with bad news during her tour, Cravity are hoping to impress fans and their label, and Blackswan face a shake-up. So the episode opens with fans explaining what happens when an idol goes through a scandal, and how this can impact their future if proven false. We're still 6 weeks after Blackswan's concert in Brussels, and Philip recaps the conflict at Fatu's mum's house in full, in continuation where the last episode left off. Fatu explains how at her mum's house they'd had some champagne and had music playing, having a nice time, when she and her mother started to cry when discussing how much they miss one another. Leia then joined them also crying because it reminded her of how much she misses her mum too. During her interview, she tells us this is because she's losing time with her mother, who is getting older. At Fatu's mum's house, Leia says she wants to go home, but the other two Blackswan members, Younghoon and Judy, wanted to stay all together and enjoy the food that Fatu's mother had spent a long time making. This is when at the get-together, Leia went to the bathroom where she cried for 2 hours. Philip explains how, while in there, Leia posted on her private Instagram story a comment along the lines of, "Wow, what a bleeping great time," which of course could be perceived as very hurtful and sarcastic. Fatu states in her interview, "If you disrespect my family, you and me are enemies," and that she and Leia did not speak at all when they returned to Korea. Leia tells us, "I don't know what the word for it is if it's not bullying," and explains how the members seem to be having fun together and carrying on as normal without her. Leia explains how she also shared her struggles with her mother, who told her that if the label aren't going to do anything to help her daughter, then she'll take matters into her own hands. Her mum then wrote to Leia's fan base and told them what had been happening within the group from her daughter's point of view. The Leia fan account posted their conversations with her mum on social media, which stated that Leia is being bullied by Fatu. This angered Fatu, mainly because Leia's mum involved their fans, thus, her words, murdering their characters and ruining their name. Fatu said that she felt, if you want to bring it to a public space, then I will too. So she also took to social media to write her own statement about where these bullying accusations stem from, but also how Leia always makes herself the victim, and everything has to be to the beat of her drum. Fatu states that she knows the truth, the people in the company know the truth, and she believes the truth will always come out in the end. Fellow Blackswan member Judy states how when the scandal blew up, it got very awkward and uncomfortable for all of them. We join Jessi back on her European tour, where unfortunately she says every stop on the tour seems to be getting progressively worse and worse. She was losing her voice for the show in Berlin, she nearly fainted at the show in London, and then there's the the ordeal of her arrival in Paris. Once Jessi arrived in Paris and got to her hotel, we found out that the event organizer booked the hotel through a third-party site, so the person who made the booking had to be there for the check-in, and he wasn't there. Jessi's friend Eddie explains how it was 3 a.m. and he secretly recorded the ordeal just in case they needed it for legal reasons. The footage shows Jessi very upset, stood in the streets with her friends and mother in the middle of the night in Paris, saying all she's trying to do is put on a good show, but people don't know how she's suffering every single day, and getting no sleep through all these hiccups, issues, and miscommunications. Jessi's friend luckily managed to find them a hotel in Paris with availability for them, but they did not end up going to bed until 6 or 7 a.m. in the morning. Therefore, Jessi and her team told the event organizers that Jessi is not going to be able to go through with the Paris show on such little sleep and throughout so much stress and poor organization. They suggested that they postpone the show for a couple of days while she's still mentally and physically drained, to which the organizers agreed. Jessi woke up after a few hours of sleep thinking there'd be no show that evening and it would be postponed as discussed, but the tour organizers didn't actually tell the venue or fans that the show was no longer happening. When questioned about this, the organizers told Jessi if she wanted to cancel the show, then you tell your fans. Eddie's secret footage shows Jessi distressed, asking, "Why do I have to say something? I'm the artist, and nobody is taking responsibility, so I have to do it. I have to get on stage and act like nothing's wrong." Eddie says that Jessi is a strong character, but her mental state was not good at this time, and she had no energy to do that show. Jessi's mum also gets upset and says it was hard to see her daughter going through something like this. We next join Cravity in their dorm. Aaand explains K-pop groups living in a dorm doesn't mean like a college dorm, but it's more like an apartment where the members get to live together and always have each other as company. Aaand explains he got into K-pop because a girl at school liked K-pop, so he covered SHINee at a school talent show, and that's when he realised he could become a K-pop idol. He got to Starship Entertainment through a vocal teacher who also taught lessons at Starship. Aaand dropped out of high school to train, and his parents were very supportive of this, explaining how because he gave up on everything to become a K-pop idol, there were definitely hard times of self-doubt and anxiety. Back in Seoul, DR Music make a plan to intervene in Blackswan's group drama, because we have now reached a stage where Fatu and Leia's fans are fighting with one another on social media. Mr. Yoon and Philip comment on how Fatu's side seems to be getting more support, so DR Music decide to write a statement saying Leia is going to seek treatment for her declining mental health. In her interview, Leia tells us about her struggles with mental health, specifically depression, something which she feels Korea does not take seriously as an illness. During this time, Blackswan were doing weekly live streams on their YouTube channel. The label had decided that during one of these, they would have the members explain the ongoing scandal and apologise to fans. Leia was supposed to say in her script on the live stream that there was no bullying within the group, but she skips over this part. You can physically see footage of the members turning to her when they notice her skipping over such an important part of the statement. We see Fatu seemingly holding up her end of the bargain by reading her script as given, explaining that there's no racism or bullying within the group, something which a lot of fans have been accusing Leia of. We then see them having a meeting with the label's CEO, who expresses he has also been struggling since the scandal has dropped, and everybody promises to do better. We're now back with Jessi just before her show in Paris, which also happens to be the biggest venue of the tour so far, which made Jessi feel even more unable to go out and tell her fans that the show is cancelled. She says, "I can't do that to my fans, but I can't pretend that nothing happened." We see Jessi go out on stage and start performing, but she gets choked up seeing fans singing along, but also probably due to her current situation that she's dealing with. Jessi says her fans give her energy, they bring her back to life and give her hope. We then see Jessi telling fans exactly what had been happening on the tour so far. With the poor organisation and shoddy circumstances, she had been left no choice but to battle through, because she's very transparent with her fans. Jessi says seeing her fans was everything to her, and in that moment she realised she can do anything. Back in Seoul, it's time for Gravity's first concert. We see them getting ready while doing their fighting chant. They already started to get emotional. Taeyong said it made him teary seeing the fans cheering for them for the first time, and Alan said the same, that he was overcome by emotions. The next part actually kills me. You could cut the tension with a knife. So they interview Gravity's managers and ask them what makes Cravity extra special. One of their managers says he doesn't think they're extra special yet, because they need to keep working harder on their skills as singers and dancers. The Starship staff in the background didn't like the sound of that, and ask him if he can answer the question differently. Maybe try explaining why they have the potential to be successful. But he says he's telling the truth, and that's what he believes. The staff are still unhappy with his answer and remind him it's important to say something positive, and this could be an opportunity to discuss how much Cravity have suffered, but now COVID has ended, it's time for them to be a success. He struggles with this again and says maybe it's best if the other manager answers this question instead. Yeah, I felt uncomfortable and I wasn't even there. We join Blackswan again, and Fatu says after the live where they tried to clear things up for their fans, the situation did not get any better, but they had to carry on practicing as a team. Fatu says Leia has now become more difficult to work with because she doesn't want to be in the group, so there's a tense atmosphere, and Fatu worries if they don't continue putting out new music, their fans will move on to somebody else. Philip also agrees, saying that having only 2 albums isn't a good idea for a rookie group trying to grow. Fatu says she doesn't wish to have any more personal relations with Leia, but she'll put her feelings aside if she has to have a professional relationship with her. Leia tells us she wants to leave the group. She feels like they'll hate her, but she doesn't care anymore. She says, "You know the movie Get Out? I want to get out," but that's not what that movie. Okay, never mind. She says she can't just leave the group though because she's contracted with DR Music. Blackswan member Younghan says it's hard for them to work with Leia, just as hard as it's getting for Leia to be in the group. Just before the episode ends, time for another cliffhanger. Company CEO Mr. Yoon walks in the room with Sriya and Gabriella, introducing them as trainees and asking Blackswan to take them under their wing and teach them what to do and what not to do as their seniors. Everybody bows to one another except for Leia. Mr. Yoon says in his interview that Blackswan already knew the group was about 50% complete and they wanted to recruit members from 5 countries. Philip explains how these 2 trainees were picked most importantly because of their nationalities. Sriya is from India, a market where he says K-pop is slowly growing, and Gabriella is from Brazil, just like Leia. The company's plan is to choose whoever proves they're ready to become a K-pop idol and add them to the group, whether it's one of them, both of them, or neither. We close out with the group's leader at the time, Younghan, telling the trainees, "You've travelled so far, but hardship still awaits you." Time for episode 3, and this one doesn't have a creative double entendre for the title, it's just called Trainees, and the synopsis tells us that this episode will show Gabby and Sriya fighting for a spot in Blackswan. Jessi visits family to reflect on life, and Jeong, who missed out on the cut for Cravity, paves his way forward. This is literally the first time they mentioned another party being shown in the documentary. Yeah, let's just get into it. The episode opens with fans talking about trainee life, what it means to join a company as a child, and what training to become an idol entails. We join Sriya and Gabriella at Mr. Yoon's house, where we get to know them a little better. Gabby says she got into Blackswan and considered becoming a K-pop idol thanks to seeing Leia, another Brazilian K-pop idol, and thought maybe I could do this too. Sriya shares a similar story, saying that she thought if Fatu only could become a K-pop idol, I thought I could too. We see cute videos of the girls beginning their journey in Korea, meeting the CEO and meeting each other. Gabby says her first impression of Sriya was, "Oh my god, she's so pretty," and was hoping they could become friends. Fortunately, they became the best of friends in a very short space of time. Mr. Yoon's son Philip explains how most trainees train for years before they debut, but Gabby and Sriya will only have trained for 6 months by the time their evaluation comes up. The girls explain to us how Gabby is on a diet to lose weight as per Mr. Yoon's request, and Sriya is on a diet to gain weight. Gabby explains how K-pop is a lot about visuals, and she's concerned if she doesn't lose the weight she needs to, then she might not be able to debut in the group. We join Jessi in New Jersey at her parents' house, where she has gone to visit her family because she needed a break. We meet Jessi's brothers, and Jessi explains how even though she gave up on her career multiple times and came home to New Jersey from Korea, her brother Eric actually started learning how to do music engineering so she wouldn't give up on her dreams. The pair worked on her craft in their parents' basement, trying to find her style and regain her confidence, something which was so important for Jessi's mother too, because it was breaking her heart seeing her usually so confident daughter feeling so defeated. Jessi says her parents are the reason she wants to work harder because she wants to be able to provide for them so they can live a happy life. Back to Seoul, specifically Gravity's dorm, Alan tells us how he trained for 4 years before he became a Gravity member and how his schedules would be from Monday to Saturday, 1 p.m. till 10 p.m. He would have dance class twice a week, vocal class once a week, and on days they didn't have classes or lessons of any kind, they'd just practice and practice. Gravity member Wonjin tells us how he struggled with his weight when he joined the label because he was chubby. They gave him 2 weeks to lose weight, so to prove he wanted to join the label, he ate only 1 egg a day for 2 weeks and lost about 15 pounds while doing this. He then auditioned again and got accepted into the label. Cravity member Woobin states that being a trainee is more of a game of survival. We're back in the Starship practice rooms, but not with Cravity. This time we meet Jeong, a Starship trainee, 1 week before his monthly evaluation. Jeong is one of the trainees who was a potential Cravity member, but did not quite make the cut to join the final group. This was a shame for both he and the members who loved him so much because they'd all trained together. Aaand says he was super proud of him when he decided to stay and carry on his training journey with Starship, despite not making it into Cravity, because he sees a lot of potential in him. Jeong tells us how he goes to school in the morning and then gets a long train to Starship Entertainment to spend his evenings there training. He says he usually finishes just in time to catch the last train home at the end of the night, getting to bed about 2 or 3 in the morning by the time he's home. Because he doesn't get a lot of sleep, he dozes off a lot in class and misses opportunities to hang out with friends because he's always practicing. We rejoin Blackswan and it's 1 week until Sriya and Gabby's final evaluation. Fatu tells us she isn't really into the idea of adding a new member to the group because it feels like starting all over again, and having to get close to another person and trying to match energies can be difficult. She says this could take 6 months to a year like it did for the current members. Younghan says she thinks they might need a few more years of training and feels like the company are rushing things. She herself had to wait years to debut, but it appears as though these trainees are getting lucky. This whole section appears to be highlighting difference in trainee experiences. We learn that Judy immediately joined Blackswan as a member after joining the company, whereas Younghan had been under a couple of labels before she eventually became a Blackswan member. Just for your info as the dearyoongi audience, because this wasn't included in the documentary in very much detail, but I got you guys. Younghan was supposed to debut with Stella, but they disbanded before she could. She then debuted with Rania when they were still Rania before their name and lineup was changed to form Blackswan, who she's now a member of. Sorry, we'll get there. Fatu says these 2 new trainees have a long way to go, but DR Music seems to pick trainees much faster than other labels. She even said that sometimes it feels like the label is just picking trainees because of the place they're from, and if they were doing that to favour a trainee just because of the country they're from, it would be pretty bad. We get a little bit of a backstory about Mr. Yoon's journey as the company's CEO next when we visit his house. He has a room full of scrapbooks and articles from experiences throughout his career that could be used as references for his successor after he retires, such as newspaper clippings about Baby Vox's success, and even an old videotape of their song, which features none other than Tupac. Philip talks about how he only saw his dad once or twice a week at most when he was at the height of his career, which was why he wanted to join his father's label. However, Mr. Yoon talks about how the failure rate for K-pop artists can be 95%, so he tried to keep his son away from this business because it can be brutal. But now he's working with his father. Philip says he sees his dad at least 3 times a week, so he's happy, regardless of the difficulties of the career. He says, "I'm not saying I'm happy all the time, but I'm mostly happy." And he gets to know his dad much better than he used to through working with him, and he does want his approval to take over the label eventually. Mr. Yoon's daughter is also here with her children, and she gets upset in her interview when asked about her relationship with her father growing up. All she can really get out is that her dad was busy all the time when she was growing up. Mr. Yoon separately agrees with this in his interview, saying he does regret that he couldn't see his children more often when he was constantly working. So he tries to make up for this now by being such a doting grandfather to his grandchildren, and we see clips of him playing with them. Okay, now we rejoin Sriya and Gabby 3 days before their evaluation. They go to get their nails done together and tell us how they both did okay in their Korean class, but Sriya did better in the exam, which worries Gabby. Gabby says that everybody compares the 2 of them because they're training together, and she often feels like she's doing her best, but it just might not be enough. The girls have some language barriers, while Sriya tries to explain that rather than being fish in the ocean, they need to be like sharks, aka strong and tough. Gabby says she disagrees because the fish have to fight harder than sharks to survive, which is what they are doing. Both girls' analogies make sense, just from a different perspective, but I understand why they might find each other's confusing. This is a great little insight into language barriers, which I think is why it was kept in. Back in New Jersey at Jessi's parents' house, Jessi is playing around with her friends' daughters, who are dancing to one of her songs. Jessi's father says all of her sons are married and have families, but his daughter gets very lonely because she lives alone, and his biggest fear is that she gives up on having a family. Jessi's brother Brian echoes this, saying that they hope for her to find somebody, settle down, and start her own family. Jessi's mum says she thinks that what her daughter wants is the same thing, sing, but due to her career, that isn't possible at the moment. Her mum feels like she has battled a lot and combats those wounds with aggression, which of course can be difficult for her. In her interview, Jessi tells us that she thinks she's single because she's so focused on work and doesn't know how to juggle both a career and relationship. Jessi says she does want love, but will have to give up her career to an extent. In her words, she says, "I thought this was a pretty dream, but it's not." We have now arrived at the day of Sriya and Gabby's evaluation. Sriya tells us she feels a mixture of emotions, mainly scared and nervous. Gabby says she has so much to focus on, such as energy and facial expressions. We get to watch their final evaluation performance for Philip, or maybe a little remake of it, who knows, but either way I found it cool to see what would sort of happen. He comments on how out of breath Gabby seemed when they finished, and that they needed more physical training. The interviewers ask Gabby what she thinks the results will be. She gets upset and says she doesn't even want to think about it. She wants to pass, but not without Sriya. Unknowingly to this and separately in their interviews, Sriya also echoes the comments of her friend and says they're so close they want to make it and debut together. Before we hear their results, we join Jeong at Starship on the day of his monthly evaluation in front of the trainee program manager. He tells us how he never feels fully prepared before evaluations. There's quite a panel of people watching him, to be honest, which is very intimidating. I got the fear and I wasn't even performing. He sings first and then dances, but they say he was too tense in his dancing and didn't capture enough emotion with his singing. The dance coach says they could tell he was nervous. We see Jeong upset following his evaluation, and he tells us he thinks this might have been his last evaluation at the company, aka he might be expecting to get let go, which does scare him. Okay, now we rejoin Sriya and Gabby, who both meet with Mr. Yoon and Philip separately from one another to find out their fates. Mr. Yoon comments on how every time he sees Gabby upset, he would tell her to go home, but she never did. Sriya gets commended on having a strong mentality in passing every test and tells her she will definitely be debuting as a member of Blackswan. She can't believe it and gets emotional as she thanks them. They comment that this is actually the first time they've seen her cry. In Gabby's meeting, they tell her that she has much more to learn in Korean, but she needs to practice more. Mr. Yoon says their staff say she has many areas to improve in, and she's not at professional level yet, but they have to make a decision today. But as you know by now, this documentary loves a cliffhanger, and the episode ends before we hear what their decision was. Okay, time for episode 4, and this one is another simple title: Choices. The synopsis tells us that this episode shows Jessi connecting with friends, Blackswan enters a new era, and Cravity will be trying out a fresh concept. The episode opens with fans talking about the struggles of K-pop idols and mental health, and fans saying we have to remember that idols are also human beings. In Seoul, we see Sriya approaching Gabby on a rooftop, and they both ask each other if they passed, aka will be getting to debut. Gabby reveals that she also passed and will be debuting alongside Sriya in Blackswan. Of course, they're both super excited and celebrate the start of their new journey together. Following this, Sriya and Gabby go to try on hanbok together and go to Bukchon Hanok village to take pictures. We get to hear from Philip why they decided to give Gabby a shot. He says that they thought Gabby would give up in 10 days because she cried a lot and struggled with the diet, having to learn Korean, etc. But she's stronger than they thought, and her resilience and commitment is what made them pick her to join the group. When we next join Jessi, it's 2 weeks since the end of her Europe tour, and she wants to get a Bible verse tattooed to remind her of her strength, no matter what bumps are in the road ahead. Her friend of 11 years, Shai, does her tattoo, while they discuss their friendship and how they were both drawn to one another because their style and vibe is quite different from other Koreans. Shai tells us that although Jessi is succeeding in her career at the moment, she wouldn't necessarily say that Jessi is happy and sees her struggling a lot. Jessi says that she thought when her music started to do well, then she would be happy, and she was temporarily, but something in her heart told her this just wasn't it. Her friend Shai very briefly mentions how Jessi lost somebody she really loved, and that was so difficult for her to deal with, but as a performer, she didn't really have any time to grieve. She explains that they call this emotional labor in Korean. Next, we're in the car with Leia, who is FaceTiming with her mum. Her mum asks if she's eaten yet, and she tells her no because she's on a diet. Her mum says this is why she has dark circles, but Leia denies it and says it's because she isn't sleeping well. Leia says in her interview that she feels like she's in prison. Yesterday, she had a talk with her manager and told him she didn't want to go to practice, but they forced her. Not in a way like they threatened her or anything, but still made her feel obliged to go, even though she didn't feel psychologically in the right space to do so. Mr. Yoon tells the interviewer that working with Leia was like, one day she'd be very demanding of him, saying, I want to hear the next title track, I want more time to practice. And then the next day she would say she doesn't want to do anything, very contradictory. Philip says they're not going to force her to stay if she doesn't want to, but her mind kept fluctuating a lot because of her dreams to be a K-pop idol. So one day she wanted to continue with Blackswan, and then the next she didn't. This is why they struggled to decide what to do with her. Leia, however, said she kept feeling like they were putting words in her mouth, things like she'll keep trying her hardest, even though she doesn't feel able to do so. Philip said they had a meeting with Leia about her fluctuating mental health, and she agreed to go through an evaluation for psychiatric treatment. Mr. Yoon tells us that it is written in their contracts that if they're struggling with mental health, then the company must provide medical treatment. Leia tells the audience how she's currently on a lot of medication just to get by, 10 medicines a day for sleep and anxiety. Because of this, she said she currently didn't feel anything, which is the only reason why she wasn't still crying. Mr. Yoon comments on how Leia is a completely different person now to when she first came to Korea. While he says this, we see clips of Leia happy and smiling in the practice room during her earlier days in the group, which we can see is a clear contrast from her vibe now. He says if they can get back to the same mental state she was in back then they would see no reason for her to leave the group because she has great potential to be successful. Leia says, it's suffocating. Everybody has to sign a contract, so now I have to do 2 or 3 more years, and if I want to go, I have to break the contract for the money they used on me as an idol. By this, she means breaking her contract would mean needing to reimburse the label for their investment in her and her career. Things such as her training, food and accommodation, flights overseas, etc. Anything they used to create the idol, as well as any money they were hoping to gain from the idol, in performances, concerts, etc. Interestingly, Mr. Yoon comments on how they had already been having issues with Leia breaking her contract by not attending practice and having issues with guys, but because she was only young and still adapting, they never pulled her up on it. Fatu says, knowing that Leia is having issues with their mental health and doesn't want to be here, why are they forcing her to stay? And they need to let her go. We now rejoin MJ, the director of Starship Entertainment, who says because Cravity haven't been as successful as the label hoped, they're going to change up their image and concept for their next comeback. Alan says looking back at the music they have released so far, it's been like a roller coaster of them showing the different sides of them. So with this new album, they will come back with party rock, hoping to show themselves as bright young adults, having fun, to remind their listeners it's okay to enjoy life. MJ says she feels this concept and brighter music will fit the members much better. Member Songmin tells us that honestly, they felt like rather than releasing music with their own ideas of what they thought would work for them, they're just going with what the label wanted. Gravity's managing head of production, Young, tells us how hard it is to figure out a group's concept, and this is something he still worries about. He discusses how Gravity are very different from label mate Monster X, whose concept highlights their masculinity on stage. Back with Starship trainee Ji-young, it's 1 week after his evaluation that didn't go very well. He says although his feedback wasn't easy to deal with at first, all the managers told him to just do better moving forward, so that encouraged him not to quit, even though he didn't know of any upcoming opportunities for him to debut in a new boy group anytime soon. While he's working away in the practice room, Gravity's Taeyoung pays him a visit. Ji-young tells him how he performed Gravity's song Jumper at his evaluation, but he totally blew it because their feedback was quite negative. He shows Taeyoung his cover, who of course wasn't as negative in his reviews, and says the dance is cute when he does it. Taeyoung reflects in his interview with us on how he always used to beat himself up about his performances during his trainee days, constantly comparing himself to other trainees he thought were better, and how he had to keep trying to improve to teach himself to be more confident. Taeyoung tells Ji-young he wishes he wasn't so discouraged by the title of trainee. He only realized that himself after he debuted. The company's creative director also confirms that nobody currently knows who will debut next, but the company always has a plan, so they hope Ji-young doesn't give up. We join Jessi and some of her friends who we met throughout the documentary as they're having a group dinner. Jessi's friend and producer J-Ro tells us how he knew Jessi for a while. He said they started out as friends before creating music together, but he always values her as a friend first rather than just a product. Now it's time for Gravity's music video shoot for their comeback Party Rock. In the interviews, Young, head of production, talks about the process of setting a theme for an album, planning the album cover, and then a music video to fit that concept. During the shoot, we see the members recording their dance scenes over and over until they're exhausted. Taeyoung and Minhee go out on a break to eat, but because they eat more during filming days, they insist that they start doing push-ups instead to focus on their image. A timestamp shows us that we are now 16 hours into the music video shoot, and everybody is pretty visibly exhausted. Aaand says it's their first time filming a music video for so long compared to other comebacks. Starship's CEO says filming an MV is a very hectic and tiring process because they're always watching their diets during this time, so they have to just power through while hungry and only taking power naps. She says, and I quote, "It's a vicious schedule." During their break, the members ask Woobin if he ate dinner, and he says no because he just picked up on the vibe that he shouldn't and was too tired to eat. Aaand says in his interview, because K-pop is so visual, every idol feels the pressure that they have to always look good. We're back with Blackswan. This time Sriya and Gabby are meeting with Doi, Blackswan's artistic director, to discuss potential makeup looks for them. She says in Korea, a lot of idols are expected to be super cute and sweet, and this can be kind of boring, but Blackswan are happy to be different and push boundaries. She tells the girls if either of them are uncomfortable with any of these choices, then they can try to find a solution, because it's important that they feel confident in what they're doing or wearing, or it doesn't work. This was quite a nice surprise to see. She mentions how in Korea, short skirts are okay but not showing your chest, whereas it's the opposite in Europe. Sriya comments on how both are a no-no in India, and Gabby says that both are a yes in Brazil. They're kind of open to it. I do like how in this part, the three women from different areas in the world were able to sit around a table and discuss cultural differences in this way. While the pair are getting their photos taken in their new looks, Gabby tells us that being an artist is not easy, but being a K-pop artist is even harder. Sriya tells us that as the first Indian K-pop idol, she never thought this opportunity would come, but now that it has, she feels the pressure to represent and make everybody proud. Next we join Cravity in their practice room when Monster X's Hyungwon pays them a visit, and the members are all shocked but excited to see him. Hyungwon tells us in his interview that he feels like an older brother to Cravity. In the practice room with the members, he asks them to let him know if anything is troubling them at the moment. To this, Taeyoung comments on how they don't really get any free time at the moment. Hyungwon says that Monster X went through that too, and had a period where they only had 2 holidays a year, and that a lot of idols unfortunately go through the same. Member Hyungjin asks him what the maximum number of weeks he worked non-stop was, to which he says 13 weeks without a single break. Cravity are all super shocked by this revelation, and Hyungwon tells him that during that time, he felt like he lived at broadcasting stations. Aaand explains in his interview how when a group makes a comeback, they do their best to promote it on music shows, which run for 6 days out of the week, as well as shooting variety shows alongside this. This means nights with no sleep and physical and mental fatigue. So Hyungwon telling them about his experiences has helped them in preparing for what's to come. Cravity asks Hyungwon what his thoughts are on continuous promotions on music shows. Because Party Rock is getting quite well received, the label wants them to capitalize on that, but they're worried that people will just lose interest after 3 weeks of non-stop promotions. Hyungwon says there's no right or wrong answer in these sorts of situations. They, the members, can think it's wrong, but it might not always be right. And if it's a terrible situation, they should talk to the company. Serim says that's the thing, because it's not a terrible situation per se at the moment. They're just trying to be patient and wait it out. Hyungwon says if it does happen, aka things get more difficult, it would be a good idea to speak to the label and express their feelings as a whole group if they choose to do so. Moving on, Blackswan are in the practice room with Mr. Yoon and Philip. Mr. Yoon comments on Leia's positive complexion, but she says it's just makeup. He asks if she's been to the hospital regarding her ongoing struggles. She says yes and mentions how she just started a new medication very recently, so she is struggling with that and not feeling too well. Mr. Yoon drops a bombshell, saying he has some bad news. Younghoon and Judy have reached a point where they'll no longer be sweating with them, his words, and due to some differences, they have graduated from Blackswan. He says, within our company, there has always been questions about why we change our members so often. There is no other company in Korea that has a graduation system, and due to this and contracts, this needs to be fulfilled whether you are happy or unhappy, or if you don't feel like this is your path, because it's hard to work as a team when there's tension amongst you. I do just want to point out that while he's saying all this, the camera kept panning to Leia. Mr. Yoon says Sriya and Gabby need to work really hard to impress fans now because they're replacing Younghoon and Judy, so it's like they'll be taking the stage as professionals right from debut. Okay, that one was a lot of talking, but trust me, it's about to speed up, I think. Time for episode 5, which is titled Dream dreams versus reality. The synopsis for this one tells us that Cravity will be heading to Los Angeles for KCON. Jessi hits the stage in Cambodia, and Blackswan are scrambling to overcome scandal. Interesting word choice. The episode opens with fans discussing things that make being an idol so hard, such as your personal self no longer belonging to you and being a product of a group. In Seoul, Fatu and Leia go to a selfie center together and take pictures. This is like the first time we've seen them speak in a long time. Fatu says in her interview that a couple of weeks ago, Leia apologized to her, and she felt her sincerity in that apology, so she agreed they can exist together as human beings. Excellent word choice. Fatu says she decided to forgive Leia more for herself because it's not good for her to hold all this negativity in her heart. They're talking in a cafe when Leia says it was very awkward when they were first fighting, but she's gotten to a point where she felt like she didn't want to fight any longer and knows Fatu felt the same way. Leia says in her interview, "To be honest, I do love Fatu, she's my friend, so I went to her and said everything," aka shared her feelings and apologized. Fatu tells Leia in the cafe that at first she didn't know if she'd be able to forgive her, but her apology helped lift a weight off her shoulders. Leia agreed and said she felt the same. Leia says that the four of them, so them two, Younghoon and Judy, used to be really close and sometimes felt like they were a family. But even though Younghoon was their leader, sometimes she was more of a baby in the way she acted, revealing that she has called Younghoon and Judy a few times, but they didn't answer. Fatu says she feels like after she accepted Leia's apology, it was like a wall was put up between them. Leia said it feels very like, oh, it's like Fatu is not on our side anymore, and now it's the Koreans versus the foreigners. Fatu says she thinks the whole controversy really hit them deep. For her, she just needed an apology, but for them, she doesn't know what it was. Maybe it can take time. To this, Leia says, it is what it is. Now we join Judy. She says in her interview when the scandal blew up, that's when she started wanting to give up. She created so many issues for them, Leah, she means, but she never apologized to them, only to Fatu. We now hear from Younghoon, who says when they would practice, Leia would go hang out. Then when they were done practicing, she would be ready to start. Judy said she started to think, I can't work with somebody like this. Mr. Yoon tells us when the scandal happened, because Younghoon was the leader, it was her responsibility to mitigate the conflict, but she failed to do so, and he was very disappointed. But Younghoon says in her interview that she had nothing to do with the conflict, so why did she have to sort it? Both Younghoon and Judy apparently approached Philip and Mr. Yoon asking to quit Blackswan. Philip says people think a contract is a powerful document, but when we have to deal with human beings' will, it is hard to keep somebody with just paper. It's impossible. We can say you have a few more years here and you're obligated to stay, but if they're not doing their best, it affects the other members too. So we decided to let them go. 1 month after Younghoon and Judy's departure, the two girls meet at Judy's apartment and both discuss how well they're doing now versus the past, reminiscing on the times they had to report everywhere they went, had a 10 p.m. curfew, etc. Younghoon says the first thing she did when she was free was go out at night, something they weren't really allowed to do. Judy says she went to Busan and ate and drank freely. Younghoon says she wishes that they traveled more internationally as a group, and the last place they went to together was Belgium. Judy says that was the last place they were all happy. In her interview, Younghoon says that maybe someday she'll do YouTube content, but otherwise she's definitely done with K-pop and the entertainment industry, without question. Judy also says she doesn't want to do K-pop either, and she's had enough with that experience. Now she wants to explore a different career path, but the thought of that makes her teary. Philip says he regrets he wasn't able to stop Leia and Fatu's incident. Younghoon says it will be hard for a K-pop group of only foreign members to succeed. Judy says if there's no Korean members of a K-pop group, she feels like it's more of just a K-pop cover group. She's sure the company will be smart and add another Korean member. Mr. Yoon says he was only looking for one Korean member to begin with, and if they're at their peak, he has no problem getting rid of them because his goal is to create a global group anyway. This whole part I was like, ooh. 3 weeks before Jessi's Cambodia concert, we see that she's overwhelmed because there's a lot to do, and a lot of stylists are already booked because a lot of people are touring at the same time. Jessi discusses how she gets a lot of backlash for the way she dresses and looks compared to other K-pop idols, because she's not this typical Korean beauty standard. Therefore, when her career began taking off, she felt forced to get a lot of plastic surgery. Jessi says the first nose job she got was what made her begin to start noticing more flaws in her face. Before that, she didn't feel insecure, but then once she started to get work done, she started to feel even more insecure. She didn't notice how bad it had gotten until people started to point out how botched she looked, and then she saw it too, so she even got her lip fillers dissolved. Now she said she doesn't care what anyone says as long as she's healthy and looks okay when she performs, then she's happy with that. But she wants to inspire more women to be themselves. It's now 3 weeks before Gravity's KCON LA performance when we rejoin them. Alan explains what KCON is to the audience, and that not a lot of artists get an opportunity to perform in front of thousands of K-pop fans. Therefore, it's so important for them to do well. We meet Eshi Gazit, I'm so sorry if I butchered that. He is their US manager, who has also worked with other K-pop artists to help them grow in the US market. He says Cravity have just as much chance of succeeding in the West as the likes of BTS or Monster X. Taeyoung talks about when he lived in Malaysia and how he and his dad did not have a good relationship. We then meet his dad, who says this is because his son wanted to become a K-pop idol, but he, as a realist, was worried that he wouldn't be able to make it, asking him if he could just do this as a hobby instead. Taeyoung says his dad would watch silently from the sidelines, but criticise his mum for letting him focus on dancing. Fortunately for them, living separately from one another has helped improve their relationship, but it's still a deep grudge that he has inside of him and feels it's kind of hard to let go of. Taeyoung discusses how during his journey so far, there's been a lot of times where he's hated himself because his career leaves it open to people's critiques, plus the fact that all the effort he's made so far could be in vain. Back with Blackswan, we find out that Blackswan have received another opportunity to perform in Belgium due to the success of their last appearance. Philip is nervous because Gabby and Surya just joined the group, but because this is a rare opportunity, they cannot pass this one up. We see each member practicing with J-Bomb. Fatu says she was heartbroken when she found out that Younghoon and Judy would no longer be in the group because she lost 2 friends as well as group members. She tells us how the leader role had now been given to her, so she has to teach Surya and Gabby choreography, details, how to be performers, etc. But she's stressed because she doesn't feel as though they're ready yet. Gabby gets told from J-Bomb that she doesn't sound confident when practicing her singing, and J-Bomb laughs when he sees Leia practicing and asks why she's pulling a face. Leia says it's because she's not on the greatest terms with the company right now. He says that's none of his business, but they have not got a lot of time, so they need to prioritize practicing, and he's going to talk to the manager about how she needs more help. Philip says Leia's fluctuating mood is not only hard for her, but also her members and even the staff, himself included. It is now 2 weeks before Jessi's Cambodia concert, and she's practicing with her dancers. She says this is her first organised show since her Europe tour, so she went over the contract multiple times so she knows all the details to make sure it's a much more professional show than the last lot. She tells us that she doesn't feel as though she's going to stop or slow down anytime soon, regardless of the hardships she's been through. It's also 2 weeks before Gravity's KCON performance, and we see them practicing too. Guys, I wish you could see my notes from when I was watching this part of the documentary. I was getting so frustrated because tell me why we're 5 episodes in and now I'm just watching a time lapse of people practicing, counting down the weeks. I literally wrote, nothing is happening in this documentary right now, in all caps. 2 weeks before Blackswan's Belgium concert, we see them practicing. Then it's suddenly 1 week before Blackswan's Belgium concert. Yay, time jump! We join the members eating dinner together. Fatu says in her interview, it's their first time performing with the new lineup and she's worried because good, strong chemistry is important to show the fan. At the table, she asks the members how they really feel about Younghoon and Judy's departure from the group, and I'm here thinking, oh my god, finally, go girl, thank you for giving me something to write about. Surya says she was very sad and wanted to live and practice together with them. Gabby said the same, but it's better you do what you want rather than living unhappily. Leia says there's so many things she wants to say, but she's trying not to, and comments on how innocent Surya is, because the real reason they left is because they were asking the label, why do you keep adding foreigners to the group? Surya says there's no point in holding hate in her heart at that, to which Fatu agrees. I'm sure Fatu agrees this even more because of what she recently just went through with Leia and how she chose to forgive her for the same reasons. Gabby said she's sad that Younghoon and Judy left in her interview because they are Blackswan. She said she started to think, are we K-pop? Because they'll live and promote in Korea, so they're K-pop artists, but are they really? Leia actually tells the members she doesn't want to be in the group anymore. She doesn't want the situation of her leaving and them having to get new members again and it being messy. They discuss their worries for the Belgium concert and needing to make a big impact on first impressions. Fatu says if they do well, maybe the fans will be more okay with Younghoon and Judy leaving because they'll see Blackswan is now in good hands with Gabby and Surya. We're now back to Cravity, who have just arrived in LA for KCON. Alan is nervous because they're back in his hometown after 4 years, but it feels so special being there with his members, as they're people he wants to share everything with. We see them at the airport, arriving, and then their accommodation excitedly taking pictures. Next we see Alan meeting up with his brother James. Alan says his brother had such a big influence on him growing up. The pair go to their family home where their mother cooks dinner for them. Alan says he was 18 when he joined Starship, so he's been away for approximately 4 years. When they walk through the door, his mother excitedly greets him and they're both crying. She says, "Finally, you're back," before asking him why he's so skinny, in true mum style. Alan tells us that he's lived separately from his dad for years, so his mum is all he really has. They're having a family meal, eating some of the things Alan loved when he was younger. His mother Jill says she worried about him moving to Korea, but when your children grow up, you need to let them be independent, saying he made his choice, so how can I tell him no? Alan said his mum was always so supportive of him, and she had it rough practically living as a single mum while their dad was in Korea, so he wanted to succeed for her sake too. His brother James said they worried about letting Alan go to Korea because they knew the idol life he was signing up for would be hard, but to go from being just somebody living in a small apartment in a random suburb in LA to becoming a K-pop global superstar is very inspirational. Next up, we're with Jessi in Cambodia the night before her concert, where she arrives at the airport and is greeted by fans waiting for her. It's been 8 months since she left her label, and she says she's learned a lot during this time, but since she's out of contract, a lot of, I'm assuming, labels came to her like ants. She tells us that she has decided that after this Cambodia concert, she wants to sign with a label again, because she's been through so much in her life, she deserves support during this time of her life and career. She says she realizes that she's a K-pop star because she sings in Korean, but she also is American and needs a label that will understand that, because it's a huge part of her life and who she is. In Seoul, it's 3 days before Blackswan's Belgium concert. Fatu says they've been practicing from early morning to late night, and their performance is still nowhere near where it should be. Some nights they were even staying in the practice room to sleep to start practicing again early in the morning. Leia says since Youngin and Judy left, it's felt like more pressure because they've never performed without them. Gabby is getting quite upset as she tells us that it's been really difficult for her, and she even considers going back home, but she doesn't want to. It's her dream to be a K-pop idol. She says, "If I don't have the talent, why did they choose me?" Comparing herself to others, she cries and says this is too much pressure. How will they let me perform if I'm not good? Fatu and Leia both say Gabby needs to get better before she's ready to perform, but Fatu says she's getting there slowly. We see Fatu being quite harsh on them with the critiques in the practice room, asking the girls to run their routines again. But she tells us the reason she's being so harsh on them is because she doesn't want people to attack them after their performance, because people can be ruthless. We're nearly there, guys. It's time for the 6th and final episode. This one is interestingly titled Karma. Maybe we'll discuss some of the potential reasons for that later, or you guys can let me know why you think it was called Karma in the comments. It's not just because of the Blackswan song. This episode's synopsis tells us that Blackswan will be performing in Belgium while Leia looks for a change, and Cravity performing in LA, and Jessi looks for her next move. The episode starts with fans talking about the sacrifices idols make and not getting to be regular people. Much shorter than all the other intros, to be honest. They got shorter and shorter as the episodes went on. We join Blackswan in Brussels the morning of their concert. Fatu says that typically before performances they would get their hair and makeup done by stylists, but because they're all the way in Belgium, they had to do their own hair and makeup for this concert. Surya and Gabby share their nerves and excitement with us, and Fatu says she's also nervous, to be honest, because it has to be the best stage they've done so far. 4 hours before the concert, Blackswan are at the venue for soundcheck, but unfortunately it's a nightmare for the girls because their in-ear devices aren't working correctly, and these are crucial to ensure the girls can hear both themselves and the music properly while performing. Fatu says, and I quote, "It's just a mess." Gabby says that right until the very end of rehearsal, everything was going wrong, which Surya echoes by saying the volume on her device kept changing, so it was confusing and she had no idea if she was in time with everyone or not. Skip across to LA, and it's the morning of KCON, aka Gravity's first US show. We see the members all getting their hair and makeup done. I just have to point out the difference in Starship versus DR Music sending their artists with and without hair and makeup. I'm sorry. It was nasty putting these clips back to back. They knew what they were doing. We see fans waiting for Cravity as well as the group's red carpet appearance. They tell us that they're just hoping for everything to go smoothly. No mistakes, no accidents, because that could be the worst thing that would happen in case it hurts the reputation, and for them that would be a nightmare. In Cambodia, it's the night of Jessi's Cambodia concert, but it's pouring down with rain, kind of like it is in the UK right now while I'm recording this audio, and the crowd waiting outside are getting absolutely drenched. At Jessi's concert, there's not a crowd outside my house, just to clarify. Jessi said she's worried because she wants her fans to have the best time and be safe, but the vibe of the audience changes when it rains. But the concert goes ahead as planned, and we see Jessi performing to a huge crowd. In between songs, she speaks to the audience, telling them that people are afraid of women speaking up, but they should do what they want to do and live how you want to live. In response to Jessi not being afraid to push the envelope and say what others are afraid to, we see screenshots of messages and support from fans on social media, saying they love Jessi and that she motivates them. Back in Brussels, it's time for Blackswan's concert. Gabby is still worried thanks to the earlier technical issues, whereas Fatu tells us she's worried because if anything goes wrong with the members on stage, they're not the ones who'll get reprimanded, but she does because she's the leader, and she's the one who was supposed to get them ready and take care of everything. In her interview, Fatu says, if this performance goes wrong, we're doomed. We then see them perform, and Fatu's mum is in the audience again, cheering the girls on just like last time. Fatu says hearing the fans cheer, all her worries fade away, and this is how she knows she has to be on stage. She lives for it. Gabby and Sriya also did very well in their first performance, and the fans seem very happy, which Fatu says is the most important thing, and leaves her hopeful for Blackswan's future. Backstage after their performance, Sriya starts to cry, because this moment is so special and means so much to her. There are more tears of joy because she's so grateful, and the members all comfort her. Philip says after Judy and Youngin's departure, fans were not happy that they didn't have any Korean members anymore, but luckily because Sriya and Gabby's performance was good enough to impress fans, we then see comments on social media appearing on screen, all praising their performance. It's now time for us to see Gravity's performance at LA KCON, and the crowd is huge, the biggest they performed to so far. The members say that nothing can beat the thrill of excitement and emotion they felt in that moment, seeing so many people cheer for them. Aaand says just a few years ago, he was here at KCON as a fan in the audience, looking up at the very same stage that he's now performing on. And now hearing fans cheer for them and give them their energy, while they're also sharing their energy with fans, is a beautiful culture that we share. Back in Brussels, it's the morning after Blackswan's concert. They reflect on yesterday's performance at breakfast. They comment on hearing fans chant Fatu's name, and Fatu says it's always great being in Belgium. Leia tells us that their concert was really good and made her forget all of the bad things for a moment, but she still struggles with her mental health and relationship with the company. The group start to discuss when they think their first comeback with this member lineup will be, and how excited they are for that, but in her interview, Leia says she feels bad because they're all excitedly discussing a comeback, and that's not something she wants to do. While the other three are happy, smiling and chatting away at the table, we see Leia kind of just sat there looking distant. Leia cries in her interview, saying it's sad for her thinking about leaving, because it's kind of like saying goodbye to her teenage years and everything she's worked on up until now. While she cries about the fact she has to give up on her dreams, we see a compilation of her earlier memories in the group, how happy she was to be living her dream and spending time with the girls she called family. But in between these moments, we now see her in her current state, sat around the group members, totally mentally checked out and looking pretty empty. Not gonna lie, this part was edited quite dramatically, but it was super sad. Leia said she's never had a normal job before, but she can't be a teenager forever, and she wants to say goodbye, but it's too hard. Over to Cravity in LA, and it's the day after their KCON performance, so they're celebrating with some fast food. They take a minibus to have a bit of tourist time and go to the beach, finally getting that free time that they've been craving. Taeyoung says they could feel their passion slowly dying from debut to now, because they've been working so hard without a break, so it's nice to get a little bit of time to be free. He says that he can't express how happy he was at KCON, it was the happiest time of his life. His dad tells us that his son is positive all the time, and that's not a quality he gets from him, but he is proud of his son. We see the Cravity members at the beach, having fun running through the sand and water, taking pictures and playing around. Aaand says there were times where it was so hard he wanted to give up, but times like this make it all worth it. Taeyoung says the higher ups at the company came to watch their performance and said they did a great job, and let's have a meal together when you're back in Korea. He explains how this is such a big deal because the label never gives them compliments, thinking if they tell them good job, then they'll slack off. But on the contrary, now this has motivated them to work even harder. Back in Seoul, it's 4 months after Jessi's Cambodia concert. She's at a photo shoot with none other than J Park to introduce her joining his label More Vision. So people can imagine and visualize that this is a power move, his words on why he's there. Jessi says she's been friends with J Park for a really long time. He's a hustler who works hard and is also Korean American, so he understands her and where she wants her career to go. We see a short clip of them on stage together in Thailand where he introduces her and that she'll be joining his label, and she says she's looking forward to the next couple of years. She says she never normally gets her mum's opinion on these sorts of things. Even her mum wanted her to join J Park's label. With Blackswan, it's 4 months after their Belgium trip. Philip says that Leia's mental health continues to fluctuate. She would not show up for rehearsal and lie about where she was, things that would not be accepted in a normal K-pop label. So they decide to send her back to Brazil to see her family and get more treatment. We see Leia seemingly relaxed while she's walking along freely, but she says since she's contracted with DR Music, she can't really do any work in Korea, so she thinks she has to leave quietly and lay low until her contract expires. Philip says too many member changes is not good for a group, which is really interesting to hear someone from DR Music say, but anyway. But because Leia has been difficult to work with, they're going to prepare a comeback without her for now. Fatu says Leia not being there does make her feel torn because on one side it is easier to work without her, on the other side that's someone she trained with and did everything together with. In the practice room we see Blackswan training with a new girl who, by the way, it takes them quite a while to introduce to us. She's just there until they say, oh, by the way, they've decided to add a new member to Blackswan, Envy, who is from America. Mr. Yoon confirms that she'll be Leia's replacement. Envy introduces herself to us, explaining how excited she is to be here. Gabby says that when they first started working together as this four, the energy between the four of them was indescribable. Fatu says Envy is amazing and picks up on things so quickly, so she was like, okay, I like this girl, she's good, adding that the members all love her too. Philip says he hopes his dad is proud of him because even though this job is very hard, he's been trying his best to make Blackswan work. We next see what exactly Blackswan were working on in the practice room. Their first comeback with Fatu, Surya, Gabby and Envy as this lineup, a song titled Karma. At the very end of the documentary, the interviewer finally asks Mr. Yoon if he approves as Philip as his successor of DR Music. He says, well, I guess I have to, and just nods, smiling. I'm sure this was his discreet way of trying to express his pride in his son stepping up the way he has, but also his own sadness at having to bid a career he's built up for so many years farewell. Okay, and at last, the credits roll, where we get to see where everybody is now, aka my favourite part of any documentary. It's always where the tea is. And when I say we get to see where everybody is, I do mean that very loosely in this case, you'll see why. We see that Starship trainee Ji-young is now in his 4th year of being a Starship trainee, and he still hopes to debut with the next Starship boy group. We see him in what I can only assume is his school uniform, heading to and from the practice room and school like he always did. We find out that Youngun is currently a broadcasting personality for Africa TV, and Judy works for an online clothing brand, Petrichor? Don't know who that is, but neither of them are looking to pursue a career in K-pop. And during their part, we see them taking fun photos together in a photo booth, like they're still friends. Next, we learn that Leia is currently living in Seoul and looking into college. We see her walking with her boyfriend and happily having dinner with friends. And it says that while she's enjoying life with her boyfriend and friends, she's still contracted with DR Music. As for Blackswan, Jessi, or Cravity, well, I guess it's none of our business. Okay, that was it for today's video. Thank you so much. No, I'm kidding. Don't go! I'm sorry, I know that wasn't funny. We'll pick up on this point later, I promise. But for anybody who has got all the way to this part of the video, episode by episode run through, you deserve a medal, and I hope it at least saved you some time in watching the whole thing. But let's discuss what my thoughts were on this documentary as a whole, and what I thought was wrong with it. Honestly, it was a nice idea. It's of course not the first documentary of its kind. Multiple companies and streaming services have tried their hands at producing a K-pop documentary, because the Western world has been kind of fascinated by the K-pop industry industry for a long time, and the way in which the trainee programs operate, especially prior to the days where K-pop was as well known in the West and no one really knew a thing about it. I haven't watched all of those documentaries, of course, so I won't be comparing them to this one. That wouldn't really be fair without seeing all of them, and who has time for that? But I do have a few issues with this documentary that I think I can speak on, so complaining time. First of a few issues I have with this documentary is, I don't know who exactly this documentary is for. What audience is this aimed at? Each episode of the documentary opens up with a K-pop fan teaching us something about the K-pop world, such as what idol training entails, the sacrifices idols have to make, and what happens when an idol gets into a scandal. Then we also have the artists themselves at some points during the documentary explaining parts of the K-pop industry. For example, when Gravity's aaand had to define what K-con is, and when the creative directors of Starship explained the process of coming up with a concept for a comeback. You would think these are all information that would be aimed at non-K-pop fans who might not know these things. But then at the same time, I do feel like in places the documentary does skip over, or perhaps not go into as great a detail as it could, on some really important factors of the K-pop industry that an outsider just wouldn't know. There are definitely gaps in content explanation, where it feels like the audience are just expected to know what's happening or fill in the blanks themselves, or if it is explained, it's explained very briefly. A major example of this is DR Music so casually addressing their graduation system and how they've had so many member changes. So that's what got me thinking, is this documentary supposed to be aimed at non-fans, but they know full well the majority of viewers will be K-pop fans, so didn't have to worry too much about being more direct? What further solidified this for me was not giving us a where are they now about everybody in the documentary. Usually when a documentary has looked at a few different subjects throughout, it is nice at the end to inform the viewers of where they all are now rather than a few. While we got updates on Jiyoung, Youngun and Judy and Leia, they did fail to give us any little updates on where Jessi is now, or Cravity or Blackswan. Now you could argue that this is because they kind of wrapped up their stories within the documentary and gave them conclusion, but this documentary was filmed 2 years ago. Who knows what could have happened between now and then? And everybody's story, while wrapped up, appeared to be given the start of a new chapter for each of them as their conclusion. Jessi joined a new label, so how did that go for her? As a non-K-pop fan, I would have no idea she's already left this label this year. We saw that Cravity were embarking on a new concept. Did it help them gain more fans? Have they changed their concept again since? Blackswan added a new member. How did their comeback Karma do? Is that still the current group lineup? They bragged at DR Music about this graduation system within the documentary, so how would I, as a non-K-pop fan, know if they had decided it was time for one of those 4 members to retire too? I think it's like they decided, because these are the 3 artists within the documentary who are still working, they were probably thinking we either 1, already know where they are now, or 2, could very easily find out for ourselves. I don't know, but that's not something you would expect a non-fan to do. And if I don't know everything about this genre, I would want to know how things went for everyone post-filming, not just a few of them, if that makes sense. It made it feel almost as though their stories were deemed less important because they didn't leave them on a cliffhanger, but you wrote the documentary, you end their stories and you decide who gets to get left on a cliffhanger, you know? I knew that point would get ranty. The second major issue I have with this documentary is, what was the purpose? What did we really learn here? Synopsis for this show basically advertised it as a backstage pass to the life of the K-pop idol and the hardships they face, which I won't deny it did kind of show, but it didn't teach me anything as a result of this, if that makes sense. Now you could argue that's because it wasn't aimed at me as somebody familiar with the K-pop industry, but I would counter that with, I do feel as though if I shared this documentary with a non-K-pop fan, they would be all more familiar with these 3 very specific niche stories, but not the K-pop industry as a whole. The most we learned about the industry as a whole in general came from those 30-second snippets from fans at the start of each episode, which taught us about the expectations of a K-pop idol. Otherwise, I would say 2 of the 3 major storylines were quite niche for the K-pop industry. If you were to look at them as a complete outsider, the artist whose story probably most reflects that of the K-pop industry is that of Cravity and the Starship trainee Jiyoung. Gravity's story was focusing on the struggles of being a boy group, trying to find your concept and grow, which is a very prominent issue for a lot of K-pop artists. Whereas Jessi's issues with struggling to be a soloist from the US who wants to try and be a free agent, not signed to a label, although yes, a very important topic to talk about, is quite unique in the K-pop industry. Most artists are signed to a label. And DR Music's issues with switching up group members so often, and particularly Fatu and Leia's conflict, was very unique to specifically them, their group, and label. These particular particular stories would be great to include if you were trying to highlight the different kinds of artists within the K-pop industry who aren't just following the cookie-cutter expectations of the K-pop world to maybe expand people's horizons of what they think K-pop is. But that's not what this documentary advertised itself to be. We're supposed to be getting a look at the life and struggles of K-pop artists, but I'm not sure if the content chosen was anywhere near as accessible as it should be for a documentary promising that. And lastly, I have one more complaint, which you guys are probably expecting because it's the first thing I said in this video: the length. Now, I won't just blame Apple TV for this. There's an epidemic of multiple part documentaries being 6 episodes long when they really do not need to be, because the content is simply not there, and that's okay. I quite enjoyed the pacing of the first 3 episodes of this documentary. It got to the point while still giving us a lot of content, and I thought that would be something that when I wrote this script I'd be praising them on, but I noticed a shift when we got past the 4th episode, and by episode 5, where every cut was 3 weeks until their concert, they're practicing, 2 weeks until their concert, they're practicing, 1 week until their concert, oh my god, and nothing new was happening to make it even worthy of doing a time jump. That's when I started to think, no, this isn't it. At a very push, I think this documentary could have been 4 episodes long, 4 good episodes that would have been jam-packed full of content and still gotten us to the same point. Sure, we might not have had a few of the concert clips or dinner scenes, but if this documentary is aimed at non-K-pop fans, then I'm sure they'd much more prefer us getting to the point. I do love to add any additional context where context is available, that's why my videos are as wordy as they are, but I don't feel as though some of the extra additions in this documentary were necessary, especially when they didn't add anything to the point of the story, highlighting the struggles of these artists. Okay, if you're still here by this point, get yourself a nice drink or snack because you deserve it. I know I just tore this documentary apart and said it didn't necessarily teach me anything new about the life or talents of a K-pop idol, but that doesn't mean it didn't teach us anything about these artists, because this documentary did deliver in giving us some never before seen insight into them as groups, so I thought it'd be interesting for us to discuss what the documentary told us about each of the 3 major storyline groups, if anything. This is me really trying to dig deep in this documentary and find something to teach, you know? Like a lesson. Because I'm sure there's something there, even if it's not immediately obvious. I'm trying to do you a solid, Apple. First up, let's start with what we learned about Cravity, but also Starship Entertainment and their trainee program, because they gave us a bit more insight into this than the others did, with showing us the trainee Jiyoung's journey in his evaluation. I don't know if Starship meant to do this. I'm of course going to assume not, but their documentary parts kind of showed us that they are really struggling to value Cravity as an artist in their own right, rather than nothing more than the new money machine while Monster X are enlisted. Cravity is never going to be able to escape Monster X's shadow if they keep putting them back in there. Multiple times throughout this documentary, they compared Cravity to Monster X when they're entirely different groups, different concepts, different sounds, different everything. And then hearing the group's own managers say that they don't think the group is special in any way was quite a shock, to be honest. It made me feel as though Cravity have the potential to offer the industry so much, but this might not be fully actualized at their own label yet. I don't think Starship are fully aware that Cravity do have potential to be successful within their own right if they were given the tools to do so and not just seen as Monster X's little brother group. Of course, Monster X are incredible, but they can be too. The only person who I felt really knew this was their US manager when we briefly met him, and he said they had just as much of a chance to succeed in the West. Now for trainee Jiyoung, I felt quite bad for him too. His inclusion in this documentary, although definitely necessary because it highlighted the trainee life and the difficulty of evaluation, it was in no way utilised in the best way it could be, and I don't feel like we learned as much about him and his struggles as we could have, or his relationship with Cravity. We saw a couple of clips with him with Taeyoung, but if he was so close to debuting in the group, then that was something that probably deserved a bit more attention. All of his scenes felt kind of just thrown in there as gap fillers in between the drama. Now as for Jessi, this one's an interesting one for me personally. I would say out of all the artists in this video, Jessi's story is the one I was most familiar with already because I am a fan of her, so to say I learned something new about her is difficult. Even more so because one of her major struggles they highlighted in this documentary was the issues with her Europe tour, and I literally already did a whole video on this. But one thing we did learn about Jessi in this documentary was her reasons for leaving P Nation, which I knew was going to be interesting when they came out. And I completely understand her wanting to try and have a career in the K-pop K-pop industry as her own boss. But I think one thing we learned during this documentary from Jessi's story is that although we critique K-pop companies all the time, because sure, their practices can be brutal sometimes, they exist for a reason. In a lot of industries, artists can work independently without being signed to a label, but we learned alongside Jessi during this documentary in real time as she went through more and more months being unsigned, just how difficult this can be, working within the K-pop industry without the support of a label behind you. So while we all know that Jessi is a very strong woman, and the documentary did try to highlight that, I think we kind of learned to accept that there might always be a conflict between an artist like Jessi and the K-pop industry. While an artist like Jessi knows she's a strong independent woman and believes in her abilities to do this on her own, the K-pop industry has been designed in such a way that only the strong survive. But here the strength only comes in numbers and not in the individual. Company size, staff, doing all the background work, funds available, streams, album sales, the size of your fandom, etc. Everything is money focused and number focused. Part of me does feel like this could be part of the reason that contributes to Jessi's struggles at various labels, where she's finding strength in herself. They want her to find strength within them and their system, but that's perhaps a topic for another time if you guys want to see that, because I had like an epiphany and I would love to share it. Now, last but certainly not least, what did we learn about Blackswan? Okay, I don't know where to start on this one, don't hate me, because it's not them we learned about, it's the label and their intentions, which we might have already known, but they kind of made themselves look worse. My partner and I have said for years that there needs to be a documentary on the story of Rania and their many member changes, direction turns, controversies. It's literally a wild story. And while I understand that this documentary was aiming to specifically talk about Blackswan, this would have been a good opportunity for the label to teach us about their reasonings for so many member lineup changes in a way that would get us on side, if that makes sense. By being a little bit more open about how Blackswan came to be after the lifetime of Rania, and by explaining to us their justifications for creating Blackswan in more words than just, we haven't been able to recreate the success of Baby Vox and we want to appeal to a global market. That made it feel like they did not care about the group at all, and I feel like fans would have been a lot more receptive to why you always change up your group members if you had a more genuine justification rather than it's the thing that we think works at the time. And yes, that might be the reason, but if you're going to go into a documentary to tell your story, gotta have a better plot. They didn't really want to share the information with us about why Rania became Blackswan rather than just disbanding Rania and making a new group with Blackswan. They just casually mentioned that the label had a graduation system and moved on. They didn't really want to share that info with us. Instead, Blackswan's inclusion in this documentary did kind of feel more like an image SOS, an attempt at creating some good PR following their past controversies. Now, I don't want to come across as though I'm blaming the Blackswan girls for that in any way. I know, of course, it's not their fault that the members keep getting changed out by the company, but deciding to include the whole Fatu and Leia story in this way while the label were very clearly siding with Fatu throughout the whole documentary felt very much like they were trying to reassure the audience that the current lineup of Blackswan is the right one, that Leia was entirely in the wrong, when we have no idea at this stage if they're planning on keeping the member lineup the way it is now long term with these four girls. Even if DR Music said they weren't planning on any future member changes and the graduation system at their label is over, I still wouldn't believe them until I saw it happening long term. At no stage during this documentary did I at all feel as though they might have thought Leia was in the right during her conflict with Fatu. To be honest, I think they were very offended that Leia's mum took their issues to the fans, rather than letting the label take care of it in whatever they felt the best way to do so was. So from that moment on, they knew Leia's days within the group were going to be numbered because her whole vibe changed, and they had to kind of find a way to say it was because of her declining mental health, when Leia, of course, herself kept saying it was more about her relationship with the company as well as. They didn't really comment on that. I don't have any issues with the label using this documentary to improve the girls' PR, because at the end of the day, every single label and artist within documentaries like this will have had their own reasons for wanting to share their stories. There'll have been some sort of personal gain there, but for Blackswan, it felt a lot less about teaching us about the girls and their struggles as K-pop artists, and more about their struggles with DR Music trying to clear their name, when the reason they're in this messy situation of always being the group known to have member changes is because of their label, not because of the girls themselves all the time. But they did kind of make it appear in this documentary as though every single 10 time a member left the group, it was because of them, you know? Also, I do just want to add that I was a little bit upset for Envy and the way she was casually thrown in the documentary in literally the last 3 minutes. If this documentary and DR Music wanted to teach us about the trials and tribulations of Blackswan to get us more invested in the group, it would have been nice to see some of her trainee journey too, in the way we saw Sriya and Gabby's. Just throwing her in at the end and saying it was a perfect fit from day one felt kind of dismissive, as though they were like, okay, we opened the doors and let you in and showed you so much, but now that we've proved Leia was in the wrong and she's gone, we don't really care to show you anymore, so here's who's replacing her though. Bye! You know what I mean? Okay guys, at long last, it's conclusion time. I know you're probably sick of the sound of my voice, I'm sick of it too. I know all throughout this video, I did say pretty much just bad things about this documentary, but let's face it, that's because nobody wants me to come on this channel and say, yes, I watched it and it was good, okay, have a nice day. It's my job to help you guys look at things in a way that might not have been immediately obvious at first view, and I do hope I managed to do that in this video. I will say, I am grateful that companies are creating content about the K-pop industry, aiming this at a global market. That is always appreciated. We never truly know if it's for the right reasons or a quick money grab, but all in all, I do still appreciate documentaries like this existing, regardless of my critiques. I know they're quite in-depth. There were definitely some positive aspects to this documentary, the main one for me being visibility. Although it did lack detail and depth in some places, putting Jessi, Cravity and Blackswan on this global platform is great, and I hope it does them some good, like getting their stories out there and getting more people to hopefully, as a result of this, check them and their music out. I just wish the content and its purpose were clearer throughout. Maybe then it would have been much easier to determine who the desired audience of this documentary was, and I do hope it reaches said audience for the sake of all the artists involved, whoever that audience is. Okay guys, and that was it for today's video. I think this might just be my longest one yet by far, and the first one I've done where I watched and reviewed something in depth in this way. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. It took me a very long time to do, and I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Did you watch the documentary? If so, what were your thoughts on it? And did you guys enjoy this longer style video? I've been speaking for so long, I'm starting to forget how to speak English, so I am sorry about that, and if my voice gets progressively more insane throughout the video. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to be the first to hear whenever I upload, and I will see you next time with a much shorter video, I promise. Bye guys!